All right, let's see. This is the fifth assignment, and it's going to focus on mostly on the working on the front end, on the user interface. The previous couple of assignments has had the teams focus on implementing a data model, being able to map that to a relational database, being able to expose that data model through a RESTful service, and finally, this assignment will have you focus on implementing a user interface to interact with that RESTful service. We'll be using the React framework that you installed last week. So we'll now be working on that, and you should all have that configured so that you can run it locally on your machine, and that you should all be able to deploy to this one single Heroku account. Okay. Even though there's not the assignments are going to start becoming less and less explicit on asking you to do certain things, you'll still be responsible for maintaining good software engineering practices such as code review, pull request, merging, having feature branches. So less and less we're going to ask you to do that, right? But that still is in effect, right? Everything going forward. So let's go over some of the designs of the that are pertinent to this assignment. We're still going to keep the same use cases that the teams were working on in the previous couple of sprints. I'm not going to call them assignments anymore. I'm just going to call them sprints. In the previous sprints, we broke it up by teams in the following way. One particular team was working on the relationships between a service provider and service categories and service providers and services, right? So that was team one. And mostly they worked on a couple of data models such as users, services, and service categories, and creating several many-to-many relationship between these three, correct? And that was team one. Whereas team two mostly focused on the use cases relating to frequently asked questions, right? Being able to have folks be able to answer questions and keep track of those questions. And that had a couple of many-to-many relationships between users and frequently asked questions, and then a many-to-many between the questions and the answers. Yes? And the data models that they focused on was FAQs and the answers. And then team three focused on two other use cases which mostly were around working with questions that were specific to services. Being able to answer certain questions that was specific to a particular service that were answered by a particular provider. And there too we had a couple of one-to-manys and at least one many-to-many, right? One-to-many, one service has many questions, and then many providers can answer many service questions. Yes? So that we're going to keep this going for the next maybe a couple more sprints. And once you feel comfortable with it, and you already are you're 1% productive here, the management is going to come around and is going to switch you around. Right, just when you were getting comfortable, management decides to change you around and just break up everything, any any equity that you had gained in that knowledge, and put a wrench in that, and that's fine. It happens, and folks are going to need to now own somebody else's code. Yes. It's not available. Okay, let me just make it available. So this is section 2, right? Assignments. I'll just share it on Piazza for now. So. Okay, so it should be available now. Right, so Right. So up as we go forward, right, we're gonna start switching folks around, but we're gonna keep it like this for another couple of sprints. Right? Let you get comfortable. All right. So here's the design, the data model that perhaps some of you might have come up with. It might look something like this, where you might have one user that is related to multiple services, and one service having many users. And here we have the user underscore service class is a mapping class. And notice that the only thing that it has is foreign keys, referencing what user is in what service and what service has what users. If this were pure UML, it would be enough to just draw one single line between these two into a star and star. That would be enough. But because we need to implement this as a relational database, oftentimes we document a couple more classes in here just to capture the fact that we are implementing this using relational databases. Yes, and so here we have a class there that is a mapping class that maps users to services, right? Which is basically a many-to-many mapping. Same thing with service categories. We have a many-to-many relationship between services and categories. One service can be many categories, and one category can have many services. Right? Same thing here. The service and service category, they are foreign keys that point to the categories and the service to tell you which one belongs to which. Again, if this were pure UML, we would just draw one line between these two and just have many-to-many and call it a day. But because we want to document a little further and say that this is a particular storage infrastructure that we're using, in this case, relational databases, we have reified, we have converted the one-to-many that is here, we have converted it into a class, a concrete class that can be converted to an actual table, right, with actual foreign keys pointing to actual primary keys. Make sense? I think I answered. Somebody had asked this on Piazza, and I answered this, making that point. All right, let's go a little further. We have here also a couple other many-to-manys, where we have one user can answer many questions, and one question can be answered by many users. Right, so this too is a many-to-many. Notice that there's a one line with a star by star. Yes. So we could have now. Notice that we also have a particular answer that is answered by a particular user that answers a particular question. Yes? So we could have captured this many-to-many just like we did over there, documented it that way. But because this many-to-many not only has the foreign keys to the user and the foreign key to the service saying who answered what question, and this is the answer, because it has additional fields, such as, if this question was a true-false question, then we have a particular answer, or that if it was a multiple-choice question, this is what you chose, minimum and max. Because it has additional fields here, in addition to the foreign keys that go like this, right? We document it this way. Right? It's called an association class, right? We could have done the same thing using this nomenclature with the two foreign keys plus the additional fields. We could have done that. That would have been fine. It would have been okay. This is a little bit more accurate, a little more UML-ish, right? More down to the latest version of UML, where you document it this way. If this were UML 1.0, we would still use that old notation. Okay. What else do we have here? We have another couple of many-to-manys where one user can answer many frequently asked questions, and one question can be answered by many users. Yes? And the same thing. We have an association class that we have a specific answer that one user answered for that particular question. Right? Now this is implemented, both of them are implemented the same exact way as that mapping table over there, right? The two foreign keys, right? But those only have the foreign keys. This not only do they have the foreign keys, but they have the additional fields, right? The answers and the answers over here. Make sense? A couple other things here. Notice that the service questions can be of different types, whereas the frequently asked questions are open-ended. You know, it said, you know, how many years have you been in business? How many employees do you have? Have you, right? And folks can actually answer. Can you describe your best, your best employer? You know, can you tell me? You know, open-ended questions. So this answer could be a long string, right? It could be a whole paragraph. Whereas the service questions are more structured, right? Where folks might say, how big a house do you clean, right? How many square feet? How many rooms? You know, do you do pets? Do you do that? So they're all structured as opposed to open-ended questions. So they can be of different types. They could be a true/false question. They could be a multiple-choice question. It could be a range question, right? Min, max. So we have there's an enumerated data type, which is, so this is not a class. It's not a class. It's an enumeration, right? It's an enumerated data type. These are all the possible values of this data type here, and the service question has that type. And what type of question is it? Is it a true/false question? Is it a multiple choice question? Is it a range question? Depending on the type, the service answer has the right answers, right? If it was a true/false question, then the answer has a true/false answer, right? And the other ones are ignored. If instead it's a multiple choice question, the question here can render the choices here with this comma-separated string, and then render all the options one at a time, right? And the answer will tell you, well, which one did the user choose? Did they choose the first choice, the second, the third? What choice did they choose when they answered it? If it was a range question, there'll be the question, and whatever they chose, whether they chose for the min and the max, whatever they wrote for the min and max. Everybody okay? Yes.
What's the difference between the black promise and the white promise?
Oh, so this is a composition, meaning that if you remove the service, right, then there's no point in maintaining the question. Right? Or if you remove the service, there's no point to maintaining the relationship to a user. Whereas here, if you remove something, right, you're not going to actually remove the saved question. It's a reference, but there's no delete. There's no delete relationship between the two. Again, if you have outstanding, so close the sprint today, right, start the new sprint. If there's anything outstanding, you know, carry it over to the next sprint. If you have outstanding design questions, feel free to use some of this to as a guide or inspiration, right? To work on those design stories and close them off, because we're gonna move on. Okay. All right. So more on design. So for this assignment, we're going to be working on the following flow diagram. Right? Different teams are going to be working on different sections of this. Right? So for instance, Team 1 was working with users, services, and categories. Right? So that team can work on, for instance, being able to navigate to the administration page. And from the administration page, they should be able to maybe navigate to the users, or they can navigate to the services, or they can navigate to the service categories with the missing arrow here. I'll hide that. Whereas Team 2 was working on frequently asked questions, I believe. Right? So they might focus on these two over here, frequently asked questions and the frequently asked answers. Whereas Team 3 can focus maybe on service questions and service answers. Make sense? So notice that these diagrams show that starting from the admin page, you can navigate to a list of services, or a list of all categories, a list of all the answers, a list of all the questions, a list of all the frequently asked questions and answers, right, and all the users. See that? So they can navigate to a list of whatever data type you were working on the previous assignment. Make sense? Okay. Also, and notice that they are all lists. So presumably this is either some kind of table or maybe a long list of things, right, that display all the frequently asked answers, all the frequently asked questions, all the users, all the services, all the categories. So this is just a long list, yes, or maybe in a tabular format. Make sense? And then from each one of them, you should be able to choose a particular category or a particular service or a particular user, and then navigate to some details page. Right? A details page that would show that particular user, that particular answer, that particular service. Make sense? So the mission here, should you accept it, will be that you'll get to choose what page do you want to work on. Right? There's 9 of you in each team. There's more than enough to go around. I'm sorry. There's 3 in each team. I'm sorry. There's 3 in each team, and each team can decide which one to work on. So for instance, for team 1, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screens they could work on. They can choose 3 of those 6 to work on. It's your choice if you want to work on the list or the details page. It's your choice. Same thing, team 2. Team 2, they're working on FAQs. There's 4 screens. They can choose 3. And team 3, there's 4 screens. They can choose any 3 to work on. 1 screen per person. Make sense? You okay? So that will be your implementation story. But implementing each one of these entails, having the data model ready, right? The RESTful service ready. Yes? Because each one of these screens is going to interact with the RESTful service to go fetch all this data from the RESTful service. So it assumes that you've completed it, or you can use the source code that I'm going to give you here, right, as a starting point, as samples for you to get you going. All right. Everybody okay? All right. So that's what this sprint entails. Also, you're only being asked to do a read-only operation. Retrieve for me all the service questions. Retrieve for me all the service answers. Just read only. Right? Later sprints, we're gonna tackle being able to delete, update, manipulate other things. Just this week, we're gonna focus on being able to integrate these 2 worlds, right? The front-end world and the RESTful world, and talk to these together. Next week, once you feel more comfortable, we'll work on some more interesting things. These are the various screens. Again, the screens are I refer to the screens as 2 types of screens. The summary screens. These are the ones that do a list, a whole bunch of lists of things. So the summary screens, and they are the user screen, the services screen, the service category screen, the service questions, service answers, FAQs, and So these, notice they're all plurals, right? So they're lists of these things. So it displays a list or table, right? Anything, a collection of users, a collection of services, collection of service categories, and they're going to be mapped to these URLs. Right? So to navigate to any one of these screens, you would type /admin/users, /admin/services, and so on and so forth. Yes? And incidentally, the admin page, which is kind of the root, the entry point of this whole endeavor, right, will be mapped at /admin. Right? /admin navigates you to the entry point over here. Yes? Okay? All right, so those are the summary screens. The summary screens are then you have all the details screens, right? Oh, notice that I've broken it up also by team, so you know which ones you can work on. Yes, right. The detail screens are the ones that you can go get there from selecting a particular service or selecting a particular user, right? And you can navigate to them. So I've broken them down. There's user details, service details, and so on and so forth. And notice that they're mapped to the same URL as the summary screen, but adding the ID of whatever user you chose, whatever service you chose, whatever service category you chose, the ID, the unique identifier. Make sense? Okay. So here's an example. If you start from the admin and you select that you want to manage users, it navigates to users. And if you select a particular user, it navigates to the user details, right, with the URLs display at the top. Make sense? Are you good? All right. Now, both of them, both the list, the summary screen and the detail screen, both of them are going to have to go talk to the database somehow. Now, we have already worked on this in the last couple of sprints, right? Creating the data model, creating the repositories, creating the RESTful services. And if you haven't, I'm giving that to you this sprint, so you can start closing down those stories that you might have spill over to the current sprint. So these services are there, and they're exposing this data model through a RESTful service. Yes? And you're going to be working on these screens that need to talk to the RESTful services down here. Right? So to do that, we're going to have to create here on the we're going to have to, all this is going to be written in JavaScript incidentally, right? All these screens are going to be written in React, which is uses JavaScript. In the middle, we're going to have this JavaScript service, which is going to be a mirror image to the Java version. Right? If the Java version is providing the RESTful services, the JavaScript version is going to be reading from this Java RESTful service. Right? It's going to send AJAX RESTful calls through HTTP. It's going to fetch all the users, or it's going to fetch a particular user. Yes? Right? So if it's this screen, you're going to be using this over here, find all users. It's going to go down to find all users, going to retrieve to a select star from users to come back with a list of users, and then you're going to iterate over that list of users, and you're going to render it. Make sense? And we'll see how to do that today. I'll give you an example how to do that. If you are in the user details and you select a particular user, right, you'll know the ID of the user that you want. You're going to go and use instead find user by ID, which is going to go and create a RESTful service to this web service over here. It's going to do a select star from user where ID is equal to the ID. It's going to come back as a JSON object. It's going to render it over here. Make sense? Everybody okay? And you get to choose on whether you want this screen or this other screen. Yes? But there are some things that is common to both of you, right? Both of two teammates are going to have to collaborate and work with this common file, because one of the functions is for one use and another function is used by someone else. So there's going to be a lot of, there's a lot of trampling, opportunity to trample on each other, and so you're going to have to do a lot of communication and do PRs and make sure that I merge your code and I merge yours into mine, right, and keep working together before we both merge it into master. Yes? So there's going to be a lot of collaboration between the two, because I'm going to have my feature branch and you're going to have your feature branch, and somehow we have to collaborate, right? So there's going to be either side by side, and you merge each other's code into each other's branches, and eventually somebody, maybe the third student's teammate can code review both of you and then merge it into master. Yes? So that's what's interesting. That's what really this course is about, right? Dealing with all those minutiae of having to work together. The other part where you might need to collaborate is on this side, right? Because one of you is going to be very interested in implementing this particular function, and someone else is going to be interested in implementing this other function over here. Yeah. Again, so same thing. There's a lot of opportunity of stepping on each other's toes as you implement these functions over here. Okay. Right. Now, the requirement is that you each one of you will take each one of these screens, but deciding on who's going to work on what on the service or on the client or the server, right? I'll leave that up to you how you want to break that up, right? Who's going to be, you might decide that one student just takes care of all the service stuff, right? Maybe you might want to break it out like that. Okay, and that would be okay. Any questions here? Make sense? All right, here's just a sequence diagram that illustrates how the communication is working. The actor, the user is gonna visit the web page. The page is gonna load some React component. The React component is gonna invoke a finder method, either find all or find by ID, with a React service. So up to this point, it is all on the browser. So that's the browser here, running on the browser. So all this is JavaScript on this side. The final is this is gonna be an HTTP request that's gonna go and be handled by some RESTful service on this side, which is gonna use the CRUD repository, which is gonna do a select star on the database. So it'll come back, it's gonna convert it into a list, right? It's gonna convert it into an array of JSON objects, and the HTML is gonna iterate over that and then render it for the user. Not quite like this, since this is a little bit misleading because it looks like as if it's synchronous, and it's not. It's asynchronous. But close enough. Oops, where are we? Right. So you're gonna have to write this, right? The user service. You'll need to write one of these for every two screens. Right? You're gonna have two screens that use the same service. Right? So for team 1, we'll need to write 2 or 3 of these services. Team 2 is gonna have to write 2 of these services, and team 3 is gonna have to write 2 of those services. Right? For the user service, the service, the service category services, and so on and so forth. Everybody okay? For wireframes, this is what the screens might look like. You're free to make them look prettier, right? But it's fine if they look just as awful as these. This is just using a generic example where I'm using movies. We have Terminator, Blade Runner, Aliens, and The Matrix, and it's a summary because it's called a summary screen because I'm not showing all the fields. I'm only showing a subset of the fields. I'm only showing the movie title, the director, Rotten Tomatoes. I'm leaving out a whole bunch of other things, right? And so it just summarizes, and it's a really, it's a very quick way of looking at lots and lots of records in one single screen. Yes? If I select a particular one, it navigates to a details page, and the details page might have lots of fields, additional attributes, like the plot, the genre, the rating, the running time. Also, it lays out the content from left to right. On the right-hand side, the fields are specific to the data type. Right? If it's a date type, maybe it has a date widget. If it's something that it's an enumerated data type, maybe it has a drop-down. Right? If it's a long string, maybe it has a text, and so on and so forth. Yes? Make sense? Another thing that another requirement here is that notice that the first field here is a drop down. Typically, that drop down would not be here, right? But because this is part of a larger thing that we've been working on, and to be able to break anyone who's working on the details page and be independent on someone who's working on the summary screen, right? To have folks be able to work independently of each other. Right? I've added this drop-down over here. This drop-down lists all the primary keys of all the objects, right, of all the movies. So that if I select a particular movie, it goes out and fetches that particular movie and just reloads it. So meaning this page is standalone, right? It doesn't really need this page, right, to navigate from here to here. I can just navigate in this page and just select this drop down, and I can choose which one I want to render. Make sense? Right. Again, that's all so that we can break up the work that somebody's working on this page independently with somebody working on this page. Eventually, what we would like to be able to do is navigate from here, select this particular one, and just navigate directly to here. We can leave that for the next sprint. Okay. Another thing that I don't know if you've noticed. I don't know if you've noticed. When I say that you can navigate to all the services, I mean all the services. Right? And why does that matter? Well, typically, it matters more if I look at this. For instance, if I navigate to the questions, I can see all the questions. Right? And that makes sense. But navigating to all the answers might be less intuitive. Because typically, you would see the answers that were for a particular question. Right? Oftentimes, it makes no sense to consume all the answers. Right? And usually, I would like to be able to see the answers that were answered for a particular service. Right? For a particular user. Yes? Because the answers relates three classes, right? It relates the actual answer for a particular question answered by a particular user. Make sense? But I didn't want to get into that just yet, right? Even though the data models that you've been working on should support it, right? The many-to-manys and the one-to-manys and all that should support it. But we'll deal with that complexity in later sprints, right? What we really would like to be able to do is something like this, right? From admin, I would go to users. From users, I can select the user. I can see the services that user provides, select one service, and then for that service, see all the questions and the answers for that service. Make sense? Right? It's like triply nested. You know, I go from user to service to questions to answers. Right? Right? But we'll deal with that complexity a little further down. Right now, it's just I want to be able to list all the questions, list all the answers. Same thing with frequently asked questions, right? Typically, I would like to first select the user, then see all the frequently asked questions for that user, right? Right. But again, we'll deal with that next sprint. Any questions so far? Make sense? Okay. Okay, as a team, close the sprint. Right? Meet as a team. Select what screen you want to work on. Okay. And bring over any of the other stories that you didn't complete in the previous sprint. Create a new story for this brand new screen. Now, it might be that you already might have a story in the backlog. You might have already written a story to implement a user list, or display a list of services, or display a list of categories. If the story is already in your backlog, you don't need to rewrite it. You don't need to. If it's not there, create a brand new story. If it's there, or you need to tweak it, then tweak it. Right? Change it a little bit now that you might know a little more, right? and bring it, and as a team, load the sprint with create a brand new sprint and load it with the new, at least those 3 stories. You'll need at least those 3 stories. Yes, create these screens. Now you will also need a story to make sure you get you need the service, right? The client side service. Somebody's going to have to do this service. Somebody's going to have to own this. Somebody's going to have to own this as well. So you'll need a story for that. See if that's working, if the RESTful service is okay. Can I hit it and retrieve all the users? Can I retrieve all the frequently asked questions? Maybe I'll create a couple Postman services and try it out, see if it works. Right? Same thing. Can I hit that with the RESTful with a REST query, but from JavaScript? So somebody's going to have to own this. Again, this story might be 2 separate stories, right? One assigned to one student, and another one assigned to some other student, of writing, the find all users assigned to one student, and the find users by ID assigned to some other student. But it's the same file. So not necessarily assign the file, assign the work to be done in a particular file. Make sense? Same thing for the REST. Somebody's going to have to own implementing this. Ideally, the same student that is working on users will also own find all by users, right? And find all users on this side. Yes? Right. So I would break it up into 4 stories, maybe 4 one-point stories would be enough. Okay, one for the component, one for the service, and one for the user service on the server. Make sense? Okay. Here I give you some examples on how you might want to break it out. This is just an example. You might want to break it out that whoever's using the users, right in the user screen, maybe they focus and they do all the RESTful stuff on Java and get both finder methods working. Find all by ID. Find all and find all by ID. Maybe they handle that. Or if somebody's working on the server side, on the client side, the person who's working on details can focus on the client side, right? Mirror image of that service. Yes. Plus, since this might be a little bit easier, they might also work on the admin, right, and registering this page on the admin so they can navigate to that page, right? And then whoever's working on the services, they're kind of lonesome and they'll work on their own services.js, and then the service Java. Again, this is an example. How you might want to break it up. So have sprint planning, do a sizing of the stories. I would imagine that each one of these stories might be a point. Assign them to everyone. Have folks choose their own. And then every weekday, meet face to face. Have a 5 to 15 minute Scrum meeting. So I'm just gonna keep that paragraph there just to remind you that that's still in effect. Right? You're still using Scrum. You're still using Agile. Right? You're still doing sprint planning. Still source control. Right? Feature branches. Individual tasks. You'll be working on what I just mentioned. And so here's a some sample code that I'm sharing with you. Yes.
So for this assignment, there's not going to be an organizational.
Yeah, there's no organization level team, just team and an individual. So here I'm giving you a couple of sample code that you can use. All of it, parts of it, or none of it, right? And only take it as is. So just for example, right? For example's sake, for instance, for the user service, I give you an example on how to write the find all users, which you might have already done for the previous assignment. Maybe, I don't know. You should have already completed this. If not, it's right here. It's also find by user ID. If you haven't, again, feel free to use it to complete your implementation story. Also, how to connect to it using React, JavaScript. Right, this is using the singleton pattern, where you instantiate if it's using a static instance. If it's not there, it instantiates it. Otherwise, it just returns the same instance. And then the 2 calls of find user by ID and find all users is using localhost, a RESTful call to retrieve the data from the server, and then just parsing it and converting it into a JSON object. And on the client side, the summary might look something like this. You have a really simple, stateful component that on mount just goes off and retrieves all the users. Right? Once it retrieves all the users, it saves it in a local state of users, and then it uses it to iterate over all the users and generate a table row for every single user. Very trivial, very easy. Right? And we'll do this together in class today just to illustrate for you. Whereas the details might look something like this, where you have, again, if you prefer rewriting this as a stateless component, go ahead. Right? If you prefer doing that. If you prefer using Redux for state management, go at it. Okay, it's up to you. If you how many are familiar with Redux? And all right, so if you prefer doing that, go ahead and do it that way. Here I'm just retrieving that particular user, and then just rendering that user. You can select. I have a drop down here with a drop down with all the list of users with their ID, so I can select the user by their ID, and then go and fetch that particular user from the server, to then render a form, right? I'm just displaying the username. So again, a very trivial example. Okay. So I've given examples for everybody. So everybody has starting from the same place. Deliverables, I've tried to simplify the deliverables as much as possible. Basically, most of everything you'll be creating a story for the TA to go and check for the Scrum meetings notes, and you'll attach that to the story. Any new stories that you created, attach the links to the story to a story, and assign it to a TA, so the TA can then go in and look at the stories that you created. Yes.
A question about when we assign the stories to the TAs,
yeah.
What sprint should we put these stories in?
In that particular sprint, the current sprint that is on.
For our organization, or because I know there's also a sprint that involves it's for the project, the whole
Yeah, there should be one single sprint for the organization, so everybody starts and finishes at the same time as an organization.
Okay, well I know before that there's also a sprint that had the TAs already, and I know some people put the stories in that one too. There's for the whole class wide whatever project.
No, it should be in the sprint for the team.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So I've tried to simplify this quite a bit. I'd love to hear some feedback. All right, any questions? Yeah, so next week we'll continue a little further with this. We'll start adding some testing, some client-side testing, some server-side testing, unit testing, structural testing, and also introduce some more features such as being able to. This does only a read-only operation, retrieving all the users, retrieving a particular user. Next week we'll introduce other features such as being able to remove users, edit a user, right, create brand new users, things like that. But by then we'll have an infrastructure set up that we can then build on and just keep adding additional features. All right.